Everybody, good morning. We're just gonna wait until we get closer to 9 o'clock and we'll get started then, so please be patient. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on Native American advocacy. After this training, we hope you will have a better understanding about our work at FCNL and will feel confident enough to lobby your representatives on Native American policy. So let's go ahead and get started. So just a little bit about our organization. The Friends Committee on National Legislation is a Quaker lobby for the public interest. FCNL lobbies Congress and the administration to advance peace, justice, opportunity, and environmental stewardship. FCNL acts in faith to create a world free from war, a society with equity and justice for all, a community where every person's potential may be fulfilled, and an earth restored. Since 1976, FCNL's Native American Advocacy Program has worked to restore and improve U.S. relations with tribes so that our country honors the promises made in hundreds of treaties and that the U.S. upholds its trust responsibilities. Legislation we have lobbied on for Native American policy includes the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act, the Indian Child Welfare Act, Tribal Law and Order Act, and the Violence Against Women Act. So what do I mean when I say lobbying? Lobbying is a conversation. It's about finding common ground with your representative and building a respectful relationship. It's about using your knowledge and experience to influence your representative and their decision-making process. You don't need a special degree or education to lobby a member of Congress. Anyone can be a lobbyist. So how exactly can you make a difference? There are many ways and different forms that you can lobby your member of Congress. One way is to call your representative. Another is to mail a written letter or send an email or an in-person visit. Studies have shown that staffers have a better experience when they have a lobby visit in person. It is a more lasting impression compared to just a phone call or a letter. While those are still effective, telling your story in person can be more successful. So first thing you need to do is to prepare for your lobby visit. You have to choose your issue, and it's better to choose one issue to discuss at the visit rather than too many topics. You do your research, learn the facts you need to help you support your position. You don't have to be an expert on the issue, and it's okay to not know the answer during the visit. Your research is just helping you find a way to tell your story and make your ask. Once you have gone through the whole structure of how your visit is going to look like, practice, practice, practice. Make sure you know your ask and know your talking points. And most importantly, you are going to schedule your meeting in advance. So what will an in-person visit be like? At FCNL, we use what we call the lobby visit roadmap, and that is how we guide our meetings. So let me just break down each step in this roadmap process. The first step is the introduction. That is, who are you? Where do you live? Give your address to prove you're a constituent if you so desire. Tell your name of your group or your meeting. And if you're lobbying as part of a group, it'll be very helpful to provide a staffer with a list of names of your delegation before you begin talking. The second step is the thank you. This is to thank the office and your representative for a position which they have taken that you support. If you can't identify their position on bills or anything they have supported in the past that is related to your issue, you can thank them for taking the time to meet with you. The third step is the ask. This is what you want your representative to do. Do you want them to vote yes or no on a bill? Do you want them to co-sponsor a bill? Do you want them to talk to leadership? Find your ask and stick to just one ask. Sticking to one ask is far more effective than having many asks thrown at one time or discussing many and differing issues. A member is far more likely to work with one ask. The next step is your story and the facts. This is about sharing your story. In a recent study, 80% of congressional staffers said a personal story related to the bill or issue was very helpful, but only 20% said they heard personal stories during their visit. So what exactly is your story? Why does this issue matter to you personally? How does your issue affect your community? Has it affected someone you know? Have you seen a story in the news that is concerning to you? This is the time to use that story to help make your ask. The next step is follow-up questions. You ask for and listen to the legislators or staffer's response to your story and your ask. If you don't know the answer to a question, please do not make it up. Again, you do not have to be an expert on this issue. So it is okay to say, that is a great question, I don't know, let me follow up on that. After that, we have the closing part of this, where you're going to thank once again and repeat your ask. Always repeat your ask. If you have a leave behind or a fact sheet with talking points, you can leave this here at the office. Make sure the staffer or legislator has your contact info and thank them for this visit. Finally, we ask that you follow up. Ask the staffer or legislator when they want you to follow up. Otherwise, email them within 3 days of the visit. This is your chance to respond to any questions you are not sure about and to also reiterate your ask. The first and important step is choosing your issue. What is the one thing that you want to discuss during this lobby visit? At FCNL, our priority for Native American policy is to bring awareness to the crisis of violence against Native women. We seek to raise awareness on the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women as a part of this lobby work. As we mentioned earlier, for your visit, it is very important to do your research to support your ask. So here's just some facts on what we've been working on and what we've been using during our lobby visits. According to the National Congress of American Indians, over 80% of Native women experience violence in their lifetime. More than half of Native women have experienced sexual violence. Native women face murder rates that are 10 times higher than the national average. The vast majority of Native female victims of sexual violence experience this violence at the hands of a non-Native perpetrator. And that fact is important to note, and I'll explain that in the next slide. So the Violence Against Women Act is an act that provides valuable funding to support the investigation and prosecution of crimes against women. This bill is authorized every 5 years, and it allows this funding to be allocated to the programs it supports. The last reauthorization was in 2013. This reauthorization was a significant win for tribes because this created the Special Domestic Violence Criminal Jurisdiction. This affirmed tribal authority to prosecute non-Native offenders. Prior to this special jurisdiction, non-Natives could not be tried in tribal courts. Instead, these cases would typically fall under federal jurisdiction, but many of these cases would go unprosecuted. So it is, once again, important to note that the majority of the crimes against Native women is at the hands of a non-Native perpetrator. So the Special Domestic Violence Criminal Jurisdiction allowed tribes to once again have jurisdiction over non-Indians before domestic violence. In the 5 years it was implemented, it had 143 arrests, 73 convictions, 85 defendants account for 378 prior contacts with tribal police before their tribe implemented this provision. So these were repeat offenders that could not have any consequences for their actions prior to this special jurisdiction. This jurisdiction does not cover violence between strangers. It does not cover sexual violence, stalking, sex trafficking, or child abuse. It also does not protect officers who may be harmed or assaulted while carrying out this jurisdiction. So this part is the ask. This is what we at FCNL use during our visits and make this ask to make change. VAWA expired in January of this year, and now it's a time to reauthorize the bill and to make much needed changes. We ask Congress to recognize tribal jurisdiction and inherent authority over non-Indians for crimes of sexual assault, stalking, sex trafficking, and child abuse. We also ask that tribal officers be protected while carrying out VAWA provisions. So we often encounter common staff responses or questions, and folks want to know what are the best ways to respond to this. So I'll use VAWA as an example, and I'll also just give a generic response to this. So you've done your research, you know why it's important to strengthen the tribal provisions in VAWA, and can see the ethical need for your rep to protect Native women. When our advocates go on lobby visits, we often find they run into the same situation. So let's say your rep has supported VAWA in the past and plan on doing so again. That's great, but knowing that they are already supportive shouldn't end the conversation. Now is the time to make sure that they know the research and connect with your story. Thank them for the support and ask if they can go an extra step. Are they willing to talk to their peers or to leadership on this issue? Will they sign a letter of support, or are they willing to write an opinion piece in your local media in support of this bill? These are just some examples. They can go an extra step to support this bill. Another response is that the representative is not on the relevant committee. So let's say the Judiciary Committee. Ask if they will reach out to that committee's leadership or peers on that relevant committee in support of the bill, and to make sure their peers know that this is an urgent issue and that they should prioritize it. It's not common to find a rep that is not in support of VAWA, but they may not be in support of expanding tribal jurisdiction. Again, it's important to do your research on this. For this particular case, it would help to point out just how successful the special jurisdiction has been over the past 5 years. In general, if a rep does not support the bill, you want them to, there are many ways to approach this. First is the lobby visits and sharing your story. Another is to engage the media. Write a letter to the editor for your local paper in your district or in your state. If you use social media, try tweeting out to representatives in addition to writing letters. We have found that representatives are also responsive to receiving a tweet and understands the impact of the issue when you tweet it, as well as go on a lobby visit. Okay, so let's say that you have a group of people that are interested in lobbying on this issue. Numbers can matter for some offices. You can get your friends, family, and community involved in these visits. You can share action alerts from FCNL. You can teach them the ask. You can schedule group lobby visits and build a stronger relationship with the office. Change is progressive. You might not make the representatives do a completely reverse or change their positions right away. Ask them to move toward a neutral action. That's a step towards a new position. This could be not co-sponsoring a dangerous legislation. This could be voting present instead of yes, or asking their party leadership to not bring this legislation to a vote. Once they're in a more neutral position, continue encouraging them to move toward a positive action. So you can find fact sheets, letter templates, action alerts, and the lobbying roadmap at fcnl.org. I also recommend you check out our partners at the National Congress of American Indians and their extensive research on violence against Native women. The National Indigenous Women's Resource Center is also another excellent resource. They publish a magazine that goes in depth on missing and murdered Indigenous women and violence against Native women. So I highly recommend checking out their website at niwrc.org. So we know that was a lot of information to throw at you in this short amount of time. We do want to take this moment to see if anyone has any questions.
Okay, so Ruth Ann has asked, has the slide changed since the first roadmap slide? Can we get theses, statistics, and suggestions?
Once again, the lobbying roadmap is available at fcnl.org, and the National Congress of American Indians has the Policy Research Institute, and they actually have a whole website dedicated to data and research. What I used with the facts of violence against Native women was from their most recent research on the special jurisdiction.
Jeff Kissling wants to know, might this be an advocacy team issue in the future?
That's a very good question, Jeff. I'm not certain. I know that advocacy teams will be working on gun violence in the future, but this is something to definitely bring up to your representatives, see if this is something that can be an individual cause for your team itself and not just the team nationwide.
Janet wants to know, how does FCNL suggest lobbying to expand VAWA to include Indigenous people from Maine and Alaska?
Well, that is also a very complicated issue because those states have a whole different relationship between tribes that are in that state. There are ways that you can specifically cite in the language to include these settlement tribes, to include the tribes in Maine and in Alaska. So far, they've been very good at including Alaskan natives. Again, the whole situation with those two, especially within Maine, is very complicated. And hopefully with long-term advocacy, especially on the state level, that relationship can change between the tribes.
Susan asks, how does Native American violence versus women compare to other minorities such as Orthodox Jewish women, Latino women, etc.?
I can't cite a specific statistic, but from my research, it seems that Native women have the highest rates compared to overall the nation. Murder rates are 10 times the national average for Native women.
Feel free to ask Lucina more questions either through the Q&A function at your bottom toolbar or through the Zoom webinar chat.
Will this training be available online to those who cannot be with us today? From Mary Snyder.
Yes, this webinar is currently being Facebook live streamed. It will also be available on our website.
Jeff Kissling wants to know, does FCNL have Native people engaged that we might contact?
We work with various organizations that represent tribes across the nation. So as I mentioned, the National Congress of American Indians, the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, those are different ones that are working on violence against Native women. Whenever I get this question about folks that are interested in engaging in Native issues more, I always suggest reaching out to your local Indigenous communities, getting a better understanding of their history, what their asks are currently, and how you can be supportive of that. So I always highly recommend to recognize the land that you're currently on and working with the tribes that are the Indigenous stewards of that land.
From Mary Snyder, what is the status of the bill right now?
So right now, the bill expired in January. It was not a part of the whole budget bill, or it wasn't extended. So technically the bill expired September 30th, like other budget items, and it was just extended to December and then January and so on. But right now it is expired. They are still being funded. These programs are still being funded. Right now, we are expecting Congress to introduce their Violence Against Women Act Reauthorization Act. There might be something happening this week, so hopefully stay tuned to see what's going on with that. In the meantime, we are still monitoring this. We are still encouraging folks to talk about VAWA, even if there's no bill number, to keep talking, bringing this this issue with their representatives. You can also check out our website, fcnl.org/NALU, N-A-L-U. That is our Native American Legislative Update. That is an email newsletter you can sign up for that conveniently puts an action alert in your inbox each month. So again, VAWA right now is hopefully in the process of moving forward this year.
From Julie, are there differences between Eastern Indigenous and Western Indigenous women?
In terms of the violence that they experience, it's pretty standard all over, but the data that we currently have is limited. That is due to a lot of factors and different reasons. One of them is poor data collection, limited accountability within law enforcement. It's been the efforts of a lot of grassroots organization and women's advocacy groups that have tried to find a better understanding of the crisis of violence and the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Recently, the Seattle Indian Health Board released a report that was looking at missing and murdered Indigenous women across urban areas. What often happens is that folks are very focused on tribal lands, which means reservations, trust lands, and they are not really focused on urban natives, although over 80% of Native people have relocated and live in urban areas. They are also still affected by this level of violence. So this report is through, once again, the Seattle Indian Health Board. From their research, they were able to find over 500 cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and that is just with the limited amount of data they had access to. They were still in the process of trying to get more information, so that number is still likely to be far higher than that. Again, I highly recommend checking out the report.
From Ruth Ann, are there bills in place that need updating regarding the rights of state versus federal tribes and/or addressing educational and economic preparation for positions of equity?
That's a wonderful question. I can't speak specifically to those issues because my focus is on violence against Native women. I would highly recommend, again, I always refer to them because they're fantastic, the National Congress of American Indians, because they kind of break down their policy priorities each year, and it goes by different sections and it lists different bills that they are working on. So that is a good resource that you can find on their website that can give you more information of what the ask is, what needs to happen, and what are the bills they are working on in terms of education and equity.
Feel free to also ask Glacina about questions if you're planning a lobby visit in your home district, or if you'd like to write a letter to the editor in support of Native Americans, you can also ask about that.
So, from Julia, Georgia, where I live, does not contain a reservation. Native Americans are mainstreamed yet suffer discrimination in voting and other ways. How does this bill benefit them here, and how can we make our representatives appreciate its importance for mainstreamed Native Americans?
Um, by mainstreamed, I assume you mean urban natives. Again, it's bringing up that information that this isn't limited to just reservation or tribal land, that this is happening all across America, especially in urban areas. Um, it, again, it's always an issue where they want facts, but it's hard to give that hard data because that is very limited in the data that's collected. That is another issue that is trying to be worked on in this. I did not bring it up in this presentation, but another bill that we are working on is Savannah's Act, to which the premise of this bill is to build stronger and better databases and to hold law enforcement accountable for collecting this data and to empower tribes to ensure they had equal access and control over this information. So again, I would highly recommend that despite having no reservations in that area, that it is still affecting folks urban-wide, and to use that report from the Urban Indian Health Institute or the Seattle Indian Health Board as a resource.
From Susan, if you live in an area where there are no known Native American pockets of population, who would you approach?
For that, I always have difficulty because I can say there's always someone that's there. So I would again try to like do more research within the history to see what is going on with the tribes and where they are and whether or not they are so state or federally recognized or recognized at all. And if not, you can still keep talking about these issues. You don't necessarily have to have a tribe in that area or within your district to bring up these issues. And I would ask that you would try to strive to be powerful and effective allies that are listening to tribal leadership, and not just trying to do efforts on your own, but trying to see what the tribal leadership in general across the nation is trying to work on. Okay, it looks like our questions are winding down.
Thank you all for joining us today for a live lobby training with Lucina. If you have any more questions or if you need support in doing this work, you can always find information at fcnl.org or by reaching out to our staff over email. We'll also follow up with you all with an email with resources that Lucina listed and other ways to get engaged with your community. So thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to join, and please share this recording with others.